أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. We are into the third session of our discussion on Tafsir of Surah Rahman, Surah number 55 of the Quran. And as we talked about the importance of this surah on the first of Ramadan, and we looked at the 4 ayat yesterday, beginning with the words Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan allamahu al-bayan. The very first statement of this surah is basically the unique aspect of this surah is that it begins with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a name which is unique to Him. Nobody can be called Rahman. You can have Abdul Rahman, but you can't have somebody known as Rahman Bhai. That would not be acceptable in the Islamic perspective, because that is a unique and special name for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the beginning of this word itself is an indication to the theme of the surah. It's a surah which talks about the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the issue of Rahmaniyat and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the beginning of the surah. The very first blessing is very interesting to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, prioritizes the items. Allama al-Quran is first, Khalaqa al-Insan is second, and Allamahu al-Bayan is third. As I said yesterday, a human being writing this book would have started with Khalaqa al-Insan, Allama al-Quran. But no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to explain that the most important blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is His guidance. And Quran is the prime example of hidayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first blessing in this surah is the Quran, the divine guidance. The second, Khalaq al-Insan. And then Allah talks about the creation of the human beings. And then He goes on to the issue of Allamahul Bayan, that Allah gave us the capability to have intellectual understanding of issues and to basically reach to the end product, which is known as ilm and knowledge. If you remember, when we talked about this issue of Allama al-Quran, that the guidance is the most important blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is also confirmed by the ayat of Ghadir. It's amazing the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it, where He says, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي. أتممت عليكم نعمتي. Today I completed for you my ni'mat. Which ni'mat was He referring to? In Ghadir, He's not talking about material ni'mat. He's talking about the system of guidance. And so that wilayat of Ali bin Abi Talib there becomes the completion of the ni'mat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll look at ayat number 5 and 6 this evening. After talking about the divine guidance and the issue of creation as well as intellectual capability that Allah has given to us, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the 2 major signs in this space for us as part of His blessings. Ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bi-husban. The sun and the moon. Well, you understand what it means there. There's the sun and the moon. You don't have sun and sun. The sun and the moon swim or flow in this space. Bi-husban. Husban is from, hisab, according to a calculation or according to the design and the decree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for them. And this is where we see that they will not move but according to the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this has been confirmed if you look at the ayat in Surah Yasin, ayat number 40, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَا الشَّمْسُ يَنْبَغِي لَهَا أَن تُدْرِكَ الْقَمَرِ. The sun has no right to overtake the moon. Both will move according to their own timing and speed. وَلَا اللَّيْلِ سَابِقُ النَّهَارِ. Neither will the night overtake the day. You will not have a night and a night. No, night and then day and then again night. So even there, we are talking about this system that we see in this space. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying everything has been decreed and planned according to my will. وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. And all these planets that you see, they are basically swimming in this space according to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Basically, if you look at this perspective, when we talk about Shams and Qamar, not only that they swim according to the calculation, rather the sun and the moon, in relation to the earth, become the basis of our calculation of time. Everything that you see, whether it has to do with the issue of day and night, or minutes and hours, days and weeks, or months and years, everything you will see, whether you go by the solar calendar or the lunar calendar, everything is based on this husban, that the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Let me just spend about 3-4 minutes because sometimes just visualizing these concepts helps us more. If you just look at the writings which are there, and you will see what this ayat is saying. This is where we get 1 year, 365 days. Then even the rotation of the moon around the earth, and the earth itself rotating around its own axis. That's how we get day and light. But not just by itself. The day and light will only come when there is a light from the sun. So the rotation of the earth as well as sun together in relation to one another give us this sense of the day and the night. So when we talk about the concept of time, we realize that everything there is based on the movement of the earth in relation to the sun and the moon. And not only that, even if you look at the seasons, that also is based on the same system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us. The day and night, again, that also is based on the sun and the movement of the earth. This is the issue of these seasons again. When we are told to basically do the namaz ayat, it's again, namaz ayat itself is a way of acknowledging the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason why we have namaz ayat in solar eclipse or lunar eclipse is just to make us realize that all these things are controlled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not fear them, do not worship them. And that is where the issue of namaz ayat comes in. Because everything is moving in this space bihusban, according to the calculation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designed for all these the planets. This is the moon, our problem. And we'll come to that at the end. Yeah. That also everything to do with the lights coming from the sun to the on the moon, and from our perspective on the earth, how we look at it and which side of the moon that we are able to see at that time. And so even the Islamic calendar is based on that system of the sun and the moon and the earth in relation to one another. So even in Islam, if you look at the issue of fasting, the issue of Hajj, everything is dependent on this system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in this space for us. Even the issue of tides and how it impacts on the earth, and the impact it has. I will come to ayat number 6, which is relevant to that also. Okay, so let's move on then. But when we talk about the issue of the sun and the moon, that they themselves, move around in this space according to a system, but the movement of the sun and the moon and the earth itself become the basis of our calendar and our timings. The next ayat number 6, وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ يَسْجُدَانِ, the herbs, the things that grow on the earth, and وَالشَّجَرُ, the tree, يَسْجُدَانِ, they do sajda. Now, we know that the term وَالنَّجْم is popularly known for stars. But here, if you look at the combination of the term an-najm with ash-shajar, shows that it doesn't mean the star in the sky, because the word najm literally means tulu, rising of something. And because the stars for us, they rise just like the moon would rise at night time, that's why it's known as najm. And when the herbs, vegetation, when they basically sprout through the earth, they break the earth and come up, that is also kind of a tulu. And that is why in Arabic, even the vegetation which is there on the ground, the grass and many vegetable which does not go on the tree, they are basically known also as an-najm. And so after talking about Shams and Qamar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then comes immediately to the earth. And he says the next in the list of the blessings is وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ يَسْجُدَانِ, the herbs and the trees. They basically do sajda. We'll come to the meaning. What does it mean, sajda, when we talk about najm and shajar? Basically, even the sun and the moon have an impact on the growth of vegetation and our fruit on this earth. So again, it's connected to one another. The herbs basically are the source of food for us that grows on the earth, and trees, we are talking about the source of food for us, which are there on the in form of the fruits on the trees. Even when we consider animals to be our source of food, of course, in a limited list that we have, they're also the herbs and the fruits indirectly involved, because the animals also feed on the same source of food that we have. And so whether we eat just animals or we go directly to vegetation and fruits, this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that you have the Shams and Qamar, which has an impact on your life on earth, as well as the source of food that I have created for you on the earth itself. Now, what does it mean when it says yasjudan, prostrate, to do sajda? Basically, this is an expression of humility and submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here the words yasjudan is not in the meaning of the sajda that we do. It's not that the tree does sajda. Of course, in internet you will find a tree which does ruku, but there's only one unique. The trees don't do sajda as such, or the herbs don't do sajda as such. What it means is that they submit totally to the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for them. That is their sujood. That is their submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way the sun and the moon submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, similarly and Najm was Shajar also submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, some people have tried to translate this ayat and explain it in a way that the herbs and the trees do sajda to human beings, which doesn't really, there's no basis for that. There are some, mufassirin who go in that direction. Yes, everything is there for us, as I said yesterday. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this dunya and everything in it for us. He made everything subservient to us. But we have been created for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here sajda doesn't mean sajda to us. It means sajda to the will and the system that Allah has created for them. Let me now go back to the issue of Shams and Qamar. But before that, if you look at even Surah Jummah, you will see not only the concept of sajda is there for the herb and the tree, everything in this dunya, Shams and Qamar, vegetation and trees, whatever is there, in a way submits does sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not in the way we do sajda, in the sense that they submit to the system that Allah has created for them. This will also be easily to understand when you look at the concept of tasbih. In Surah Jummah, right in the beginning, what do we say? يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. The word ma is very important. In Arabic language, whenever man comes, it refers to living things. Ma comes for non-living things. And what does this ayah say? يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ. The tasbih of Allah is done by whom? Ma fis samawat. For everything which is there in the heavens, wa ma fil ard, and everything which is there on the earth. So we are not talking about human beings or animals only. We are talking about inanimate items also, that they do tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There also the meaning of tasbih is not the way we do tasbih. It means they submit to the will and the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let me go back to the issue of Shams and Qamar, the Islamic calendar, which is based on the Qamar, on the moon. And we started the month of Ramadan on Saturday. But there is a group here in Toronto and North America, ISNA, those not all Sunnis, those Sunnis who are basically following the Saudi line of issues. They started on Friday. And this is where we get to this controversy all the time. And I thought maybe this would be an opportunity to talk very briefly about this beginning of the month of Ramadan. Science has come to our help. We know that, yes, Hilal is the beginning of the Islamic month. What is Hilal? Hilal is not the new moon. The new moon, the birth of the new moon is when the moon completes the circle around the earth. And it comes at a point where the sun is on one side, the earth is on the other side. And therefore we from the earth's direction cannot see the moon because there is no light on our side of the moon. It is totally dark. And so there are people who say, well, science for centuries and for centuries in future can give us the timetable of the birth of the new moon, because it's a very, bihusban, the movement of the earth, of the moon around the earth is very precise. We can have a centuries timetable of the birth of the new moon. Why don't we go with that? Well, you have to realize in Quran the term uses hilal, ahilla. Hilal is not the new moon. Hilal is when the new moon, after the point of birth, moves away from that. Gradually it takes about 16 to 20 hours for it, where the sunrise, the sun rays will go to one side of it. Very thin line will appear. And that's where we call it crescent, the visible moon. And that is known as Hilal. And that is the beginning of the Islamic month, not the new moon. Actually, according to the astronomers, when they have a term I've seen in their books, where they say new moon is actually no moon. In a sense, you cannot see new moon. because of the position in which it is. And so if you look at some of the Muslim scientists who have worked on this issue, look at the situation of last Thursday. Last Thursday, and this is a graph they make based on their studies of the last 20 to 25 years, when was the crescent sighted? How many hours after the birth of the new moon? And there is a dispute among the scientists. That's where we still have a problem. It's not only a mujtahideen issue, it's even the scientists have dispute on this issue. Some of them say once it's 16 hours old, you can see it. Some say no, it has to be 20 hours old before it can be seen. And so based on that, what you see here, this is the point where the visibility would start. And the visibility is very, very, very weak initially. There are 4 graphs there. The red means you can only see it with optical aid. And if you remove that optical aid, telescope, you will not be able to see it. The gray area means you will need the optical aid to see the new moon, the crescent. And after that, you might be able to see, depending on the conditions of the weather. Blue is where, if the weather condition is perfect, you will be able to see it with naked eyes. And green is where it should be definitely visible with naked eyes. This is how this is the situation of Thursday night. And we see Mecca is here somewhere. And this black area means these are the areas where scientifically it's impossible for the hilal to be sighted. I don't know how the Saudis announced that they saw the moon there. Because according to the scientific calculations, it was impossible. Because black area means this is an area where it cannot be sighted at all. Now they have their own criteria. They actually say that we don't look at the visibility of the crescent, we go by the birth of the new moon. And this is the ISNA criteria also, one of the major Sunni organizations. They say that if the birth of the new moon happened before the Maghrib in Mecca, then the next day would be the first of the month. We have a problem with that because, number one, it is not sustainable from scientific point of view. Number two, even from the Sharia point of view, there is no hadith at all, let alone the Quran, which says Mecca will be the line of, deciding the beginning of the month. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived in Medina, never said that I'll use my ilm al-ghaib to find when the moon is going to be sighted in Mecca. That was never ever the criteria, and so. And that's the problem with them that we have. Of course, there are many Sunni organizations, even in GTA. They have their own Hilal committee, and they actually started the month of Ramadan on Saturday and not Friday. They went against this Saudi-based system, and there are 80 masajid associated to them, and some of the major ones who go by the regional sighting. If it is sighted in our region, then we go with it, otherwise not. And since Thursday night it was not possible to be sighted in North America, they didn't declare Friday to be the first of the month of Ramadan. Look at the same chart on next day, Friday. You see now the visibility curve has expanded. It's covering all the way from Australia, and green area is the area where it will be seen very easily. Blue area is the area where it will be seen depending on the weather condition. Gray area, you can still find it, but you might need to look for, telescopic aid to find it, and then look at it with naked eyes. Red one is the one where it is only visible with telescopic equipments. We are here, this area. So we were well in the range of visibilities. Green and blue would be, without a problem. And the moon was sighted in Miami as well as Milwaukee. And that is the basis that we have gone with Saturday as the first of the month of Ramadan. Now that I have brought you till Ramadan, let me just give you an indication into Eid. Okay? And if you don't like the results, I can't do anything. It's science. There was a time when we were told, why our non-mujtahideen do not follow scientific data? Now that we do this, they say, oh, why don't we have global Eid? Well, you can't have global Eid, because moon is not supposed to be a global phenomenon. You see, if we go back, Ayatollah Khoei, rahmatullah alayhi, one of the greatest mujtahideen of this century, who Allah blessed him with the opportunity to train 3 generations of mujtahideen. Even in Qom, the majority of the Maraji are actually students of Sayyid al-Khoei even now. And so he had a great impact on the, in the fiqh circles. His perspective was that once it is visible in one point, then you just draw a line north to south, and everything to the west will follow it. And to the east of it, as long as they share common night, they will follow the same sighting. And that had made things easy. But the question is, either we want the ijtihad to continue, or we just want to look at convenience and stop the door of ijtihad and further research. The ulama who would come later on, people like Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Khamenei, they actually have accepted the scientific data. And they do not anymore believe in this concept that if it's sighted in one area, the whole north-south line would follow, because the visibility starts in a curve oval form, not in a straight line. This is more research, more research which has emerged later on. So we have the same mas'ala, that the month will start with hilal, but science now is coming up with more definitive method of telling us where it will be visible and when it will not be visible. And therefore you will see even people like Ayatollah Sistani, who is a student of Ayatollah Khoei, has moved away from his perspective on this issue and goes with this, the scientific data that we have at the moment. So let us look at the end of the month. This is August 17th, Friday. North America, almost all continents are out, they are in black. So although the birth is already happening of the new moon, but it will not be seen anywhere. Then we go on to Saturday. You see, unlike the last moon, we are in you see this zone here? This is Florida. Beyond that is the gray area, and then half of US is in red, where it can only be seen by optical aid. And this is where you have the difference between Sayyid al-Khoei, Sayyid Sistani and Sayyid Khamenei. Sayyid Sistani says it must be visible by naked eyes, not only by optical aid, whereas Sayyid Khamenei believes that if it is only seen by telescopic aid, that's sufficient. But then if you look at Canada, this is actually the border line here. Where is Canada here? It's in black. And what does that mean? No visibility. So Saturday, no visibility in Canada, as far as the Muqallideen of Sayyid Sistani is concerned. Yes, if it is sighted here anywhere, for those who are in Taqlid of Ayatollah Khoei, it follows automatically. But this is where you will see the differences are there. And the differences are depending on whether you go with the science or you don't go with science. Just to, keep you ready for the Eid controversy. So, because I know it's Sunday, Monday, and the pressure would be there to do it on Sunday. But we have to realize things don't work according to our liking. Moon is not in our control. الشمس والقمر بحسبان. It has its own pattern of calculation and movement, and we just have to look for it. If we find it, sometimes we find the moon at home, so that's a different Eid anyway. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our amal for this month, increase our tawfiqat, and keep us among those who are the true followers of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad salawatullah alayhi majma'een.